Buenos dias. Good morning, my people. We are
Good
live.
morning.
Estamos vivo.
Good
And
morning.
today, we got mango. We got sangre. We have a nice collection. We got lightning joining us in a few seconds. But today we're just gonna be talking about the experiences of West Coast, East Coast living, how it differs, and our different experiences and what we've seen and what we don't see and what have you. I'll kick it off because I feel like being in New York, that's a like an epicenter for Puerto Rico. And oh, there you go. Lightning joined us.
Hi.
Good morning.
Sorry.
Your hair looks really good, by the way.
Good morning. Thank you.
Hola.
So
Hola, ¿cómo está?
so
Bien.
you know, living in New York, that's the epicenter of a lot of things. That's cultural melting pot of things, but we see Puerto Rican flags almost on every corner. Like you could walk down the block. You can't 5 mile radius. You're gonna see at least 100,000 flags throughout the way. Um, I think that's really cool to see because you don't get that wherever else every else place you go to. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm definitely very envious of it, but that's why every time we go to New York, I absolutely love it. But both my wife and I, we love visiting and we like seeing that whole Puerto Rican vibe over there.
It's really cool. So you're in California,
Yep.
and it's not this. It's not the same. It's virtually night and day.
We are so far from the spectrum. Like I don't think I've ever seen like even one Dominican out here, right?
Wow.
And over there, it's very common, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, we're kind of sort of on our own little island. It's kind of interesting because us as Boricuas, right? We are. I mean, that's the reason why this Discord server is so important because we are kind of like on our own little islands. And but being on the East Coast, or I'm sorry, on the West Coast, um, my earliest memory of doing anything like a Puerto Rican festival was this park was called Blackberry Farm in San Jose. And so basically, typical Puerto Rican, festival where everybody has their little tables, they're having their own little parties and stuff. This was a really big, it was a really big like venue, right? And so there were a lot of little amenities, like there was a swimming pool, there was stuff for everybody to do. But one of the things that I remembered that was kind of a negative thing during that was that there was this one little table, and the olders or the elders were playing dominoes, right? And like a fight broke out there, right? And I remember because I was like walking back from the swimming pool to get back to where my family was at, and then I just saw this big like shuffle of people, and then this one guy he pulled out a handgun and shot another guy. And then there was like this like stream of blood coming. That's why I remember it so vividly. It was like a stream of blood coming out of his hand. And you could tell they were drunk. Like they were drinking pretty heavily. But needless to say, we didn't have it there anymore. Because I mean it's a liability for that. So over the years, they switched it to different locations out here in the Bay Area. Another place that they had it was at the Berkeley Coliseum. If you ever take a look and see what the Berkeley Coliseum Stadium looks like, it's just like that old Roman, like brick. It's just beautiful. And so you imagine on the stage there, they had like, salsa bands playing. And the stadium's just full of Boricuas and people who just love Latin music. It's Berkeley right there. They have a little bit of everything out there. And then, so in present time, the two events that we have in the Bay Area is El Dia de San Juan Festival, it's called. And actually, ironically, the people who set that up, they're family of mine, like they're connected in some way. And then the one I just found out about is it's called Wepa Fest, and that sounds really interesting. It was the first time I heard of it. So I'm looking forward to now figuring that out. And then lastly, there's a there's a bunch of like neighborhood like salsa events, right? So like there'll be like a band, and then the neighborhood community they bring. Um, uh, they basically just have people come into the community. So it's kind of cool. You're dancing salsa in the middle of the street or in people's homes and stuff. Everybody's out having drinks. It's a cool
That we need a Wepa Fest over here for sure. That
experience.
just sprinkled in. Mango, you're up by Boston.
I am a Boston born and raised girly, massful through and through.
So you're not, relatively speaking, you're not that far off from New York, but I'm sure that there is a difference.
So I think what's really important is when my dad moved to Massachusetts, he moved here in the 90s, and Massachusetts used to have a really high Puerto Rican population. Actually, the highest Puerto Rican population you'll find in the state is in the town of Holyoke, which is like closer to Western Mass, so it's not like near where I live, but it's a very, very big Puerto Rican population. As time has grown on, though, I grew up in a city called Lawrence, Massachusetts. That place is like, we call it the Little Dominican Republic. It is like everyone there is Dominican or Dominican mixed in with something else. So it's really common, but like for me at least, like because of like just how the migration patterns work, at least here in the East Coast and in Massachusetts, when I would tell people I was half Guatemalan, that's when I would get the weird looks. Like I feel like if I was out in Cali, no one would bat an eye if I told them I was half Guatemalan. They're like, oh yeah, that's normal. But out here, back growing up in the 2000s, everyone's like, how did your parents meet? That's so weird. How did they end up married?
Yeah.
So the culture here is very different. It's changed a lot though in the past like 15 years. I want to say there's now a huge Central American population near Boston. We have a huge Brazilian population. So like it's really weird, but you'll meet a lot of Puerto Rican people here who are mixed in with something else. It's really rare you'll meet a kid who's like straight Puerto Rican unless both of their parents come from the island. Most kids here, like a lot of their parents just intermingle with whatever. And I've noticed like at least here, because the Hispanic population is so diverse, a lot of people just kind of like their only common thing is that they speak Spanish and have similar cultural things, not everything, but enough. So like the culture is just very blended here. Like you'll find a lot of hybrid restaurants, like Cuban, Puerto Rican, Cuban, Dominican, Cuban, Mexican. Like you'll find everything kind of mixed in one. So it's like Boston's really different from New York. I feel like when you go to New York, you'll know what areas is like just Puerto Ricans, just Dominicans. Like it's way more separate. I feel like here you'll know like, okay, this area has a lot of Hispanics, but then you have to like know the demographics. So like, for example, I work in a city where Guatemalans, Hondurans, and El Salvadorians, Dominicans, and Puerto Ricans. And you have to know that they all live together. They all coexist together. Really interesting. So you'll see a lot of the kids starting to use like different slangs from different countries. So a lot of Puerto Ricans here will say way now, like no way, like no mama's way. Like they'll say stuff like that because they're so used to it, because it's like, and like you'll see kids here listening to more like Mexican regional music now, as opposed to like 10 years ago. That was never something you would hear. So things have changed so much in Boston. It's like really interesting.
That's to hear that whole eclectic blend. That actually sounds really cool. Neighboring people just living together, and I like that a lot. Lightning, you are upstate in the boonies, as you like to say, up in West Bumblefuck.
North Bumblefuck, thank you. You cannot pay me to go any further west.
Excuse me. What is it like for you over there? Because when I think upstate like that, I think just white people, hillbillies,
So at least like in my hometown, it's a lot of white people. It's not diverse at all. We finally got like in my actual hometown, we just got like our first Mexican restaurant like within the last 5 years. But like the next town like over, because a lot of like us are like a lot of the towns here are little hamlets of like a bigger town. And the first big hamlet, like you start seeing like a lot of the Mexican restaurants, the Chinese restaurants. And then as you move closer to the Hudson River, I'm trying to explain this without doxing myself. A lot of the towns up here, like Poughkeepsie and just like further south, are actually immigration hubs. for Mexican, Central American, and South American immigrants, although it's mostly Mexican and Central American. So I don't know if you guys have ever heard the theory of like a third culture. Where
No,
it's
that's
basically like where even though you grow up in one culture, there's like a third culture you tend to identify with. Because you grew up around it, like you've kind of integrated into it.
Yeah, it's really common in like missionary kids, if you know, like if your parents were from America but they moved to like Taiwan to be missionaries. It's like a really common thing amongst that community.
Yeah, so at least for me, like while I don't fully identify as like a third culture, like I've always like a lot of like my friends are Mexican. I was in a relationship and best friends with someone who was Mexican basically almost last 10 years of my life. So I've always been like, if I wanted to go somewhere to speak Spanish, like that town next to me where all the immigrants are, like that's where I would get like my cultura from. So at least for me, like I cook a lot of Mexican food just because like I love it. And
Okay.
like, and especially too, like I've had to almost like, I don't want to say code switch because that's like a weird way of explaining it. But I definitely almost feel like I tend to code switch between like Puerto Rican and like Dominican slang and like Mexican slang.
Yeah.
Because at least for me, like I would always like a lot of people don't clock me as being Puerto Rican to begin with.
No.
Yeah, especially like my government name sounds Italian as hell.
Super.
Yeah.
That was my first impression of you when I first saw your picture. I'm like, are you really?
Yeah, and then you saw my parents.
Yeah, exactly. A whole different vibe.
Yeah.
I feel like the hair gives it away though.
No, so most people actually think I'm Italian and black mixed.
That's interesting.
That's what I thought. Exactly what I thought.
Like
that you had that mixed.
And it doesn't help that I inhale Italian food.
You know,
so at
one
least
thing.
for
One
me,
thing. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
so at least for me, like I definitely feel like even if you're like outside of diaspora era like areas, like yeah, I'm still on the East Coast, so it's like I never even grew up with like that Puerto Rican influence just because like where I was. Like my Puerto Rican influence only came from like my family. So for me, like I didn't really get that vibe actually until I moved to the Bronx for school. And even then, like my school was mainly in like if you went further north, it was Hasidic Jewish. And if you went south into Kingsbridge, it was Dominican. But like because my school is also a huge commuter school and they do a lot with the local Hispanic like populations, like I had a lot of like Middle Eastern friends. I had a lot of like Dominican friends. I had a lot of Puerto Rican friends. So like I really, not that I started like, I didn't really start diversifying a lot till like I was an adult. And then like working in like a tourist mall is like when I kind of started picking up like on the little things, but definitely like, at least for me, I kind of definitely just picked up more on like the Mexican like cultura like up here.
Right. See, for me, going to high school, and especially in the South Bronx, we got blended in with a lot of Dominicans. We got some Salvadorians mixed into there. So it was when you said code switching, you would get some dialect or some slang from Dominicans. Like okay, tigre, and then and like you said with the no mames way mango. We would interpret certain things, and I guess I don't know. I guess it's interesting and it's cool to see how blended we could all be with other cultures. But again, Sangre, you being up on the West Coast, yeah, on the West Coast is so interesting to hear from your perspective because you don't really get that much.
Yo, Johnny, not for nothing, tres golpes is gas. Like, and a mango.
You know what's funny? I also have my experience of meeting Puerto Ricans in Hawaii when I lived there in college because I lived there for an internship. The Puerto Rican culture out there, very interesting. Very interesting. I met people who their parents immigrated there in like the 60s and 70s and they still knew about the food. They would ask me, "Do you know how to like make it from like scratch, like arroz con andule, chuleta?" And I got invited to a luau they were hosting, because they tend to intermix a lot of the Hawaiian culture now with everything. Really interesting. They're still holding on dear to our culture, even like so far away from their original island. Really beautiful. They have a love for the island, and they mourn to go back. Like, a lot of them, they want to go back.
So something that I read about that, with Puerto Ricans in Hawaii is that we they were taken from the island to Hawaii and forced to pick pineapples.
Yeah, they were. A lot of their family members were basically like forced to go to Hawaii to farm, because their family comes from a lineage of farmers. And so when the U.S. illegally annexed Hawaii, they needed workers, because they started to have a huge pineapple production, especially Dole pineapple, if you guys know the
Mhm,
brand. They're a
mhm.
huge reason why a lot of Puerto Ricans, they quote unquote got sponsored. They weren't really sponsored. They never got paid.
They were just picked and taken.
Hmm.
But Sangre, you look like you was about to say something. Go for it.
Yeah, that if you there's actually a wiki about that, and they like to call themselves the Borinkis, and it's actually interesting that I'm hearing this from you guys about them being taken over there, because the way from the wiki read it is that there were like two back-to-back hurricanes that hit the island of Puerto Rico, and the farmers didn't have any work, and during that time there were in Hawaii, obviously things were they had lack of skilled workers, as they put it, and then so they picked like a couple of hundred people from Puerto Rico, and they brought them over to the islands, and I think it was like Kauai initially, and then from there they kind of spread, across the other islands. The other thing that ended up over there, which is really interesting, people are pretty pissed off about it, is our little coqui ended up on the island.
Hmm.
So now they're on. I think not too long ago there was another big, because they got they got what do you call those volcanoes, right, that are erupting all the time. And so I was watching some like footage of that, and it was at night. You could see all the like red in the sky and everything burning, and in the background you could hear coqui, coqui, coqui. I was like, oh, that's pretty cool.
Um, I just want to take a quick moment to invite the people in the chat. Like, if you guys have questions, comments, go crazy with the questions, because we have a nice knowledge based group of people here, and you know we'll be able to answer. And Xavier, I'm gonna come for you. I promise you, I'm coming for you. um, yeah. So I didn't know that about the cookies being transferred over into Hawaii. That's news to me.
If
You
you
know, and
watch the TV show, it's trash TV, but my husband and I have like an affinity for awful TV shows. Um, Temptation Island, you can hear the cookies in the background, because I was like, did they film this in Puerto Rico? So I like paused the show, I looked it up. No, it was filmed in Hawaii. I'm like, oh, it must be the cookies that got stuck over there. We're never able to leave.
I didn't know that. That's a nice fun fact.
One
I have
thing,
another fun fact for you guys on iguanas are actually invasive to Puerto Rico, along with quite a few other species of lizards and snakes.
wait,
I want to
okay,
eat an iguana. I want to eat one.
wait,
Like I
invasive. I thought there was like some that were invasive because they were not native to Puerto Rico, and then there's a whole other set of lizards there.
Yeah, so there's like the native lizards and fauna of Puerto Rico, but then because of the illegal pet trade with like your iguanas, certain types of geckos, I even want to say I want to say chameleons too. Don't I gotta fact check myself on that one. They're actually all invasive and they have no natural predators on the island.
Yeah, I think they've even allowed them to hunt them and exterminate them. So I've read about that.
that's fun.
Yeah, I
We have a
remember my
question for you, for you specifically, John. Sangre, from Johnny. You know, did you find it difficult living your Boricua life on the West Coast?
Well, so I was born in San Francisco, and things were, and I was the youngest of 6 kids. So I didn't really get to experience the Boricua, feeling like growing up. I was kind of like, you're born in a place with a melting pot of a bunch of different Latin American cultures, and everybody else. But like, for example, we had a dog named, Koki, right? And for my whole life, I thought it was like KOK, or like a CO, like Coke,
Mhm.
or KOKE or something. I never put that comparison with our Koki frog. I didn't know. So that was one of the strange things. And then I mentioned this, I don't know if it was on the other podcast, but when I walked into a family's home and I saw, I saw a hamaca, and I was like, wow, this is like I've never seen that before, right? And it was older generation Puerto Ricans who had gotten there like probably in the 1940s. So yeah, just growing up Puerto Rican out here was very different, and it wasn't until I was an adult and I got to go to Puerto Rico in 2011. And then in 2019, I did what I call the indigenous journey, or the Puerto Rican journey, where I just learned a little bit about all of the cultures from the East Coast, Tainos, and then also on the island. And so it opened my eyes, that it really kind of enlightened me to know more about our culture and how diverse we are as people.
I have a question for the group, actually. Uh, us being born here, in comparison to being born on the island, those born on the island, they look at us like, okay, yeah, y'all not really Puerto Rican. So, being that we're born in different parts of the coast, what is your experience, you know, dealing with those Puerto Ricans born on the island that say like, nah, y'all not really Puerto Rican?
So I'm gonna be honest with you. I've heard this conversation like my whole life, right? Like I used to go back all the time, and but from what I've understood, right? Because I'll talk to the ones on the island. They'll be like, "No, you're really Puerto Rican because your dad grew up here and he still taught you everything, and you come back all the time." But then I'll have cousins who'll make the argument, but the ones in New York, they don't know Spanish. They just know like J Lo and Mark Anthony, and like they basically come up with this stereotype that media has portrayed New Yorkers to be like. And so in their head, they think those people like the name of calling themselves Puerto Rican, but don't bother to look into the history or understand the struggles of the island. And I know now that's not true, but back then when people didn't have the same access to information, for a lot of them it was, you got to move to New York and get better opportunities. Meanwhile, we're still struggling here on the island trying to keep it alive as much as we can. So I hear both sides of that conversation because I hear pain from both sides. I think there is a lot of people who do use being Puerto Rican or coming from Puerto Rican descent as like almost like clout at this point, like because we have the most famous artists in the world coming from our islands right now. So like there is some clout using telling people that you are Puerto Rican, but at the same time it hurts the people on the island who like are legitimately struggling day by day to make it by. Meanwhile, you get to go back to like Virginia or California or Texas or wherever you're from and make somewhat of a livable wage. Like I see where people come from that conversation, and like they're both wrong in certain parts, but I think both sides have like a middle ground that they can meet at.
What about you, Lightning? What's your thoughts on that?
This is kind of like a tough conversation for me because it's like my parents came here at two very different points in their life. My father came here as a child because his parents wanted a better opportunity, but he came here in the 50s and he went back a lot. But my mother actually moved here as an adult in the 80s, like after she had met my dad. And so it's kind of like I almost feel like I'm stuck in the middle because even too, like my parents are older. Like my parents are almost like my dad is 75, my mother is like 66. So I also feel like I never really got to go back as much as my older sisters did. And especially because like my older sisters kind of established themselves, like they're 20 years older than me on average. Um, they got to kind of reassimilate more back into the island, whereas like I feel like I'm trying to like catch up on that. So like I've definitely kind of been in the point where like I don't feel like Puerto Rican enough. Like I've only been to the island literally I could count like the number of times um on like one hand. So at least for
Right.
me, like I've been wanting to try and go back and like assimilate more. And like I at least do know the history, but like I even remember like with the hurricanes, my sister's in the Coast Guard, my middle sister, she actually got sent out for Hurricane Maria relief because she was actually from like she
Wow.
knows the island well and she was like actually helping.
That's right.
Um
She's in the military.
yeah, so when
Yeah.
they sent the Coast Guard out there, she was out there for about a month, if not more.
Wow.
Um and then So like I also like I this is probably gonna be like a weird way of phrasing it, but like at least with like first gen kids, I wouldn't know like how to speak from like second or third. Like
Hmm.
you don't get to choose where you're born. You only know what your parents teach you.
Mm-hmm.
There
So
you go.
like I feel that that's kind of a huge point that's missed. Because like at least with me, like by the time my parents had me, like they weren't able to bring me back like that often. So for
Hmm.
me, like I'm trying to catch up on that like as an adult. Um, like I was blessed enough that I did learn Spanish like as a child. Um, and like as like my family has passed away and stuff like that, like my grandparents didn't speak English. I had no choice.
Right.
Because I would spend my summers in the city with my grandparents.
Hmm.
Um, so it's just like I always feel like I'm just caught in the middle of that argument. And especially too, just like as I've gotten older, I've started speaking more Spanish, like in certain areas, like depending on like where I feel like my accent's not really even like a full like New Rican accent, which
Hmm.
tends to get me clocked too. So it's just like I feel like I'm kind of caught being between like the are you sure you're even Puerto Rican? Like I don't even make it to the you're not like Puerto Rican because you were born on the States. Like, and if I do get to
It's
that conversation, I'm like, listen, my mom came here in the 80s. Like, I
it feeds
remember,
into the identity crisis type of thing almost. Of
yeah. And especially because, like, I'm the whitest one in my family by a long shot. I I'm even whiter than like the half Dominicans in my family, which is really funny. Yeah, all my nephews and nieces are half Dominican, and I'm still the whitest. I do not know what happened.
see, just to echo what you were saying, because I feel the same way. You know, not not being able to speak the language fully puts you in a weird position, because when you don't get the right dialect or the right cadence of your Spanish, people look at you like, yeah, are you really Puerto Rican? Because you're not out here saying "huele bicho" every third sentence. Like, what's wrong with you? But something that I've grown up to appreciate is that being Puerto Rican, it doesn't matter. As long as you have that love for the island, that love for the culture, and that love for the people, you know, that's what identifies you as a Puerto Rican at the end of the day.
Yeah, like even like here in the States, like during Christmas, like we would be doing parrandas in the house. Like we
I've
had our
never
all our
experienced that. That's probably the only thing I've never gotten to do was a parranda.
Wait, Wes, are you
I'm
serious?
I'm so serious.
Okay.
So
So
I
my
used to have
dad,
my
the
family.
first time he ever took me to a parranda was in Puerto Rico. My dad likes to volunteer, and my uncle is on the spectrum, so he goes to like an adult day center, and he
Mhm.
asked if we could do a parranda with all the adults in the day center. They're all like on different various disabilities, but they had a blast. We went to different houses in the afternoon, and we got to do it. And then what we started doing is that we would go to adult day centers for the elderly here in our home state, and we would do it with them every holiday. Oh my gosh, it's so fun. You have to do it.
So what I'm hearing is I'm planning a parranda. Okay.
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
We need to
I'm
plan
cool with
one
that.
for sure.
I'm cool with that. See, my
Um,
grandmother, when she came here, she came with the mission of, and I hate to say it, because she came here saying, "Hay que mejorar la raza." So that always meant whitewash. That means you have to assimilate. You have to, blend in with the white culture. You need to marry someone blue-eyed, white skin, blonde hair, and blend in that way. So get into their habits, their traditions, the white culture, and leave, what we had behind. So there's a lot of things that I didn't get the pleasure of experiencing. So parranda was one of those. I've seen them, but I just want to take to the streets one day and just bang a conga just because with everybody else. I want to
So
do.
we would do it like in the house. Like we wouldn't go like to our white neighbors or anything, but like we'd start singing Christmas carols. Like the coquito was going. Like we would make coquito for like all our friends. So like Christmas is really like that time that it was like, yeah, like we're Puerto Rican. And like when I was in high school too, we had a Spanish club, but like we would kind of try to like pull from like all different cultures
Mm.
because a lot of the kids in my high school who were Hispanic were Mexican. But like we would still do like Dia de los Tres Reyes, and like we would collect toys and like dress up as like Los Reyes Mago. And like my Spanish teacher was Puerto Rican. My high school only offered Spanish, French, and Latin, by the way. Um, so it's like I at least still got like some parts of it, but definitely like when I speak enough Spanish as like you can like I've had people like when I'm working like in the mall, like when I was working in the tourist mall, they could clock that I'm like Puerto Rican, or like they're like, "Are you Dominican?" Like I would kind of, because the cadence kind of like you said, like the cadence and the tone. I
Mm-hmm.
don't necessarily have that right cadence in the tone,
Right.
like especially too because like a lot of my family's from Brooklyn. Um, I definitely have like a little bit of a New York accent on top of that.
Yeah. I take pride being a Puerto Rican from the Bronx, because you know the Bronx is the home of hip hop and salsa. So I run with that theory, and a little humble brag, like Big Pun is like my fourth, fifth cousin. I've only met him once, as a kid. So I run with that too.
That's a cool story.
Yeah,
It's a cool story, yeah.
again only met him once before he passed, but so I can't really say I'm his cousin if I'm like fifth removed, whatever. But we're all related at the end of the day, type of thing.
Listen, I always make the argument Willie Colon didn't even know Spanish. He could sing his heart
Right.
out, but the man could not speak Spanish. He just knew how to sing. So like if you ever feel like people who love to claim, oh, he's Puerto Rican. Yeah, he's Puerto Rican, but he grew up in New York, didn't know a single word of Spanish. He knew how to sing in Spanish, and that was it.
It's funny you mentioned that because like when you listen to like this is just like an antidote. I know Romeo Santos is Dominican, but he
Mm-hmm.
grew up in the
Oh,
Bronx
man.
too.
Mm-hmm.
But like you hear that like he speaks Spanish like at home, but you still hear that New York accent when he speaks Spanish.
Yeah. Fun fact: my uncle went to high school with him.
No
I think
way.
my dad was actually friends with Tito Puente.
Oh,
My grandpa
that
used to do tennis with Cheyenne because he used to be a family friend.
that's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I forgot
Romeo is
Romeo's.
Puerto Rican too.
I totally forgot he was. Oops.
Yeah, he's blended like the rest of us. We're all a beautiful blend at the end of the day.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned that. Yesterday when I went to go get my hair cut, I've been on my natural hair journey, and at least like
Me too.
like I remember like when I was younger, I was always straightening my hair. I cooked it. Like I wanted to be a scene kid, and I wasn't a huge fan of my curly hair. And like even like my grandma on my dad's side was like she was always throwing in these like tratamientos in my hair and stuff like that. And once I finally started embracing that curly hair, it really took me like a hot minute because like all the curly hair I would see would be like the Irish girls or like the Southern Italian girls, or like they would be like the black women like on YouTube, or like the ones that like I grew up around. So for me kind of learning how to navigate that was also really tough. And
Right.
yesterday when I had gone into to get my hair cut, my hairdresser knows what my parents look like, and she's from Brooklyn. She's Southern Italian, her husband's Haitian. So she's worked with plenty of people of like my hair type. When she saw that my hair is actually starting to coil and like really take on that like afro kinky texture, she was like the happiest person ever. Because like this is my hair has actually never done this. Oh, we lost
We
Mango.
lost Mango. We lost Mango. She'll join back in a second.
So it was very much like, because even like when I go to Puerto Rico, like I start seeing more people with like the afro kinky texture. like, because like all the Puerto Ricans I've seen have almost had like pin straight hair or like very like loose curls. So I'm like
I
finally
love your hair,
being,
by the way.
thank you.
Like,
Uh,
like even when we had a full poof, it was just, it was so soft. It was nice. I,
Thank you.
anyway.
I tried. I like, so like finally being able to like see people, like I've always felt weird too, because I'm like, at least a lot of people like tend to split like the race and ethnicity thing, and at least for me, like I don't like identifying with like any particular race. Like, yeah, like I recognize where I benefit from privilege from being
Mhm.
lighter skinned, but at least with me, like the minute a lot of people clock my hair or like certain facial features, like they already know. And
Yeah.
it's just like I've always felt like too white to like do certain like hairstyles and stuff like that. But then like I see all these Puerto Rican girls now on TikTok, like they'll be like rocking the braids and like just really leaning into like that Afro like Boricua culture. And like I see the girls in the city like doing the same thing, and I'm just like, how much on like I see how much just like online discourse and even like in-person discourse of like not being Puerto Rican enough or being like too like Hispanic, like it's just this weird like third space that I've had to like get used to being in. But now that like I've like joined the Discord and stuff like that, and like I've seen like
Mhm.
people who look like me, like I know we have like quite a few like lighter skinned people with like the real tight curls. I'm like, wow, like
Yeah.
I was like,
And
I don't think I've ever seen that until now.
you,
And then
you,
like even
the segue for my next question, specifically for Sangre, since you are on that coast, when I think of you know California lifestyle, I think very posh, very bougie. Being Puerto Rican and knowing where your roots are from, how has that experience been, and how have you been able to translate that, with being into the Discord and seeing everybody from all different walks of life?
Well, yeah, I mean, I grew up in what they used to call Silicon Valley, right?
Mm,
And some people still use that term. It's kind of loosely now because when we were growing up here, the actual silicon chips were, designed, developed in the Bay Area, and I used to work in that industry as well. Um, and so there's a lot of what they call new money out here, right? You know, and because it was so new and so popular, there was a lot of work in that industry. So both my wife and I really, um, you know, we just kind of grew up in Silicon Valley and that Silicon world. So we got to see a lot of cool things. In fact, um, uh, one of the things I'll mention is that um, as I said earlier in the podcast, like I didn't really grow up with a lot of Puerto Rican people here, but as an adult, and after my first visit to Puerto Rico, I established I think great relationships with people on the island. Obviously, I've established great relationships with people on the East Coast,
mhm.
where I've gone to New York several times. One of the funniest comments I saw in the Discord the other day was so when I talk with my cousin, we're like, we're just fake Puerto Ricans. We use that term, joking about us. But the funny comment I saw on the Discord is that somebody wrote, Timu, we're a Timu Rican, right?
yo,
And I
I
was
miss
like,
this.
and
What?
I was laughing when I saw that, because it was funny. It was funny, Timu, because everybody's like, talking Timu something, right? But yeah, I mean, it's again, as an adult, I got to travel with my wife. I encouraged them actually to her company to have an offsite in Puerto Rico. And so when I went there with her, we went there twice. The first time was to go, and she was working like a project manager, so we did like a site tour with the VP of marketing and sales. And then, and I was kind of like the photographer guy, right? Because I like to take pictures all the time. And so I went and traveled with them. And then the following year we had the event. And then that was the time when I really met a lot of people from the island, from the people who coordinates the events on the island, to the just the local workers, right? The ones that pour your drink, and you start to kind of understand by like taking them to a side and say, so what's it like really being in Puerto Rico? Because I did notice a big difference from like the way the U.S. or mainland describes Puerto Rico versus the way it is there on the island. One of the first kind of shocking things was going like into Louisa, right?
Mhm.
Where I mean, we were traveling through a section, and I was like, wow, I go, this looks like a third world country, right? And because there's some rough areas in Puerto Rico, if you've not visited there, you don't know about these things. So that's when I think I really, really got to indulge myself in the way life is in Puerto Rico, the way life is in on the East Coast, and of course, life in California. Totally different everywhere.
I think that's a nice perspective to have, and especially bringing that into this conversation, just to hear it from your perspective and your point of view of what's been done and what you've seen.
I definitely like relate to that because like at least like my parents are from two completely different areas. My dad's from Rio Piedras and my mom's Cabo Rojo, but my mom grew up in El Campo, like
Mhm.
real Ibaro.
Oh,
So like I remember like going to like my titi's house, and like the shed was like built into a hill and the tree was practically growing on top of it, and it was a canepa tree. Um, and like I would just be chilling on the roof, like eating canepas of the shed with the dog. Um,
That sounds
like
fucking dope.
oh my god, when I tell
That
you I want to
sounds
move I love Cabo Rojo. Like that is where I feel home. Like there in Rio
it's
Grande,
beautiful. It's beautiful there.
and like Titi, like half the floor was dirt still. Like the baño, like you would be taking it with like the bucket.
mm,
And I always say this like as kind of like as a joke. My parents have almost always had houses on well water. And in New York during the snowstorms when we get hit bad, we don't have water. So I'm like sometimes that baño with the bucket and the cold water just hits. Like I like not even to be like funny. I was just like, all right, like I'm just like, well, power went out. Guess I have no water. Time to like bust out the gallons. Um,
But they do that in Puerto Rico, though, right? Like the people in the
yeah, like
campo, they all take cold showers. They don't take the hot. Like
yeah. So
that's
at
the one
least
thing.
for me, I'm just like, okay. Um,
I used to do that too during my summers in Puerto Rico, like if there was a power outage or whatever, because my family house is in Bayamon. So when if one thing went out, the rest of the utilities followed shortly after. So doing that, the buckets, make sure you had like 5 potes de agua on the side, and if you wanted it warm, turn the stove on and let it sit there for like 2 minutes before you dumped it on yourself, so you could feel some warmth. What I used to
yeah, like
do in
here,
the heavy storms, my grandfather cut open the what is it the water drain on the roof, the grate, and he would cut it open, and I would stand under there during the heavy storm, and I would wash myself, shampoo, soap, with the natural rainwater coming out of the
that's
spigot.
fire.
Yeah, it was. My neighbors would laugh at me. Look at because I would be butt ass naked, like 12 years old, butt ass naked, scrubbing my ass and everything in the middle of the street almost.
The white pitcher with the cracks is legendary in my family.
This
Yeah,
one.
so like even here, like when the snowstorms get really bad, like we usually have like 5 gallon jugs filled with water, or like even just gallon jugs. Like I have fully dragged these into like the shower and just like set up my buckets. So I'm like, damn, I'm already prepared.
Yeah, yeah.
um, but like, and then even like my grandfather's house in Rio Grande had running water. And like we had electricity and stuff like that, but it was still like a lower lying, like more like suburban. So like the ice cream truck would always pass through. Like I'd be running around, there'd be chickens. I remember one time I was getting chased by chickens in El Campo. Um, but then like when I go to my grandmother's house, what used to be my grandmother's house in Villa Carolina, like we would actually rent out the bottom half of it. Like she handled that when she was alive, and we would stay on the top. The top had running water. Like we had the patio, which was like the top of the other house, basically. And like we had the cisterns on top. Like we would be hanging like the clotheslines. Our neighbors have this one rooster that I still have beef with almost 20 years later.
Make it
I
chicken
have,
nugget.
oh my, no, I'm gonna turn him to Nassau Fowl. Anyways, so like I definitely feel, but then like when I would go, like my parents would take me to Isla Verde, like where all the hotels were, so like I would see some of that. Like I definitely feel like I kind of got like a nice little 50-50 mix. And then like when Maria hit, like half my family, like they took them months to just like repair their stuff. Like whereas like my grandmother's house in Carolina, like that was mostly unscathed. And then just for a little Campo love story, one of my parents' dates were going to catch mangrove crabs.
Never heard of those. I have to look it up now.
So
Yeah.
my mom's cool as hell. She's badass as hell. She would actually grab the crabs with her bare hands.
Very common in Puerto Rico.
Yeah, my mom and shelf it like crabs and lobsters, not phased at all.
No.
My dad, on the other hand, is like, he was like, I remember being like, oh my God.
They do a lot of spear fishing in Puerto Rico now too.
That sounds. See, I haven't been.
It's
in
crazy.
20 years. I haven't been in 20 years. So hearing you say that they're doing spearfishing now, and it makes me miss going. But last time I went was for my grandmother's funeral, and it's been 20 years or a little over 20 years since she's passed on. So I haven't gone back since, and I really miss it.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
big difference in time.
Yeah.
And that's funny you mentioned that too, because my dad did 2 tours in Vietnam, and he remembers like when he was in Vietnam, he's like the food, like the base like feedstocks were almost the same, like the rice, the sugar. And he was like, I remember when I found yuca, and all the white guys like in like my squad were like, what the fuck are you eating? You're gonna die. And like he's just over here like chilling. And he's like,
this would be a good point to close off. Just want to thank you guys for joining in. Thank you guys in the comments for talking shit with us. And those watching later on, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff.
Yep.
And next week we talk about the nerd culture.
The nerd culture?
Yeah, nerd culture is next week. Yeah.
Oh, wait, I didn't even see that. What?
Yep. But thank you guys again. We'll talk real soon. Yeah.
Puerto Rico para el mundo.
Damn right. And